Hi, and welcome again to the Seafood Business Accelerator. Today's module is on natural health products, or NHPs. We'll be calling them a lot NHPs throughout the discussion. I'm Debra and I'm your host. And with me is Dr. Andrew Tait from Tait Labs. Andrew is an entrepreneur and an innovator in the NHP space. So Andrew and I actually are both really excited about the opportunities for NHPs based on seafood, seafood byproducts, and maybe things like invasive species as well. So there's a lot of opportunities for NHPs, and we're going to be talking about those a little bit today. And here's a bit of trivia. Andrew and I met at it was like an NHP and food accelerator 11 years ago now. So that's pretty exciting.
No, 13 years. I think, wasn't it 2012? No, it was 2013. So that's
Oh,
back
yeah, it's
even longer.
it's going back a ways. And look at us. We both still have, our nice dark hair. Hey, we're doing okay.
That's right. We haven't changed a bit.
And we're still going. Andrew is still going with his company Tait Labs, and I'm still offering accelerators. So this is a good sign, I think. As we've mentioned before, the Seafood Business Accelerator is all about helping you capture more value for your harvests. And it may be you, or maybe somebody's watching that knows somebody who's a fisher or a shellfish harvester. But we're looking for ways to help people do things so that their lives are better than they have been. And the Seafood Business Accelerator, the SBA, is all about this business plan canvas. So we follow this template to help us make sure that we cover a variety of topics that will help us either make our project go forward or our business plan go forward, so that, just that we cover things that maybe we hadn't thought about. And NHPs are not on the business plan per se, but where they fall is under the business opportunities, the market research. Like, we always want to research what the market is for a product that we're going to make. And NHPs are something that we could make with seafood products. Oh yeah, I always say where people are sitting as well, and I forgot to say that. So Andrew is, I think, sitting somewhere close to Montreal.
Yes. Yeah, I'm about an hour and a half north in a small town called Sainte-Marguerite-du-Lac-Masson.
Beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. So how about we start, Andrew, you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about how you see NHPs falling into the seafood sector.
Great. Thanks, Deborah. Yeah, it's good to be back with you and sharing in the spirit of food innovation again. Yes, I'm founder of Tait Labs. I spent 17 years in beautiful British Columbia, where I founded the company. And I also got my PhD in chemistry at UBC there. Now I'm also an affiliate associate professor in chemistry and biochemistry at Concordia University in Montreal. So my background has been very much focused in natural product chemistry, R&D, leading to product development. And I've spent much of my career looking at turning over like byproducts like citrus peels into high value ingredients for natural health products, ingredients for food, beverage, animal feed. And beyond what we've done in citrus peels, we've had a chance to work on a variety of other ingredients, other raw materials, especially those based in seafood. And I see a lot of opportunity to explore further what seafood and these ingredients from the ocean can be used for by way of natural health products, or NHPs. They can help seafood harvesters extract more value from each of their catches, and not just selling the raw materials like the fillets or the oysters in the shell, but it can also be things that are transformed from these raw materials, like the fish skin, the bones, the roe, or the shell, into medicinal or functional ingredients. So, of course, yeah, they can be new revenue streams, and that can help the harvesters to build these integrated, vertically integrated businesses that provides more benefit to them and the community beyond just selling commodity products in bulk.
Right, right. Yeah. And so we talked about that a little bit before we started, but where, yeah, currently, often fish are sold, the whole fish is sold to a processor and it's processed, but there are opportunities to use the whole fish. And I think Iceland has got a whole program on how can we create more value from a single fish. And in these days where we are looking at declining stocks and we're looking at fishing different species possibly, but getting more value from the one fish makes a lot of sense. As opposed to catching more and more, let's catch less and get more value for that particular fish. And we also talked about oysters, and you had your thoughts on terms of which is the most valuable part of the oyster.
Yes, and I say the obvious things that are of value in the oyster are the meat, right, for protein, for nutrition, and the pearl, right? It's made into jewelry. But I like to say that it's the shell that is the most valuable part. Why? Because the shell represents a major source. Well, of course, there's calcium, but there's also N-acetylglucosamine that it can be well, it's derived from the chitin. So in the shells, there's the substance called chitin, and it can be extracted and made into N-acetylglucosamine, or NAG as we like to call it, and that could be useful for joint health, for reducing inflammation. And also, Canada is one of the only places that allows you to make a claim on N-acetylglucosamine for inflammatory bowel disease. Right? There's been some clinical studies that show that it's quite effective at helping to soothe the gut lining in people who have IBD. So lots of opportunities there for the oyster shell.
Yeah, and that's amazing. Like, often the oyster shells are a problem. What are we going to do with the oyster shells? But here's a solution to that problem. And there are other sources of chitin as well, right? That people could be looking at as potential revenue streams.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the most abundant compounds found in nature, right? It's found in mushrooms, in insect exocarps. So there's a lot of companies that are looking at different sources of chitin, but of course, fish waste, crustacean waste in particular, very rich in that material. And of course, a lot of shrimp shells, crab shells, especially with invasive species like we've talked about, the European green crab being a potential source of chitin that could be made into these wonderful products. You see that there could be a lot of benefits from these untapped resources.
Hmm. So I didn't cover this in our pre-discussion, but let's say an entrepreneur is looking at using, well, we could even say European green crab as the source of chitin. What would some of the beginning processes be for that person?
Well, I think it's understanding who your buyer would be, right? I mean, if you know that there is a potential market for this whole list of ingredients that can come from the European green crab, it's about going down that checklist. Of course, there's meat, there's the shell, like we said, the chitin. Maybe there's some minerals that can be extracted as well. I mentioned calcium. A lot of calcium comes from oyster shell in the marketplace. So it'd be understanding if you can have a buyer. I mean, you might not identify them right away, but then it's possible that somebody says, I want to buy 10 tons of oyster shell from you because they want to make a calcium carbonate supplement from it.
Right. So do the market research first, find out who it is that might be interested in buying it, and then move forward from there.
Yes, and also even before, I guess, leaving the building to talk to those people, it's important to have an extensive list of those ingredients. But then after every conversation you have, and you understand that possibly there's an ingredient you hadn't thought of that your potential customer identifies for you that you could make readily. For example, like collagen from fish scales. I can say honestly, I didn't know that you could do that 10 years ago. It seemed that most of the collagen in the marketplace was coming from cattle source. So there is a market, especially for the vegans, maybe pescatarians.
Pescatarians, yeah. So the point there is let's say you're a seafood entrepreneur and you've got this collagen, you can make collagen from your fish, and you do your market research and you determine that there is a market for collagen from fish because there's people who are vegetarians that don't eat meat, but they'll eat fish. And so there you found this niche market that would make sense for that ingredient. So, and then another opportunity, I think, as well, which I'm sure most people are already thinking this way, is in the Indigenous space. There are a lot of remedies that historically were used. Could these be something that could be brought to market for the broader consumption, or even more for trade and made in a quantity that and in a way that's safe to distribute? Have you come across that scenario, Andrew?
Yes, and a lot of, I mean, I think there's lots of examples with traditional herbal medicines, those from traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, and also in indigenous medicines that for a lot of them, they are elders' knowledge that we've largely lost, but are able to rekindle and understanding all the different things that these wonderful things from nature can provide us. And if we're specifically talking about ocean-derived healthy things, you look no further than seal oil or fish oil, rich in omega-3s. And there's lots of different types of even omega-3 compounds in there that provide different health benefits, not just EPA or DHA, but others as well that have unique properties that haven't really yet been fully explored. So depending on where you harvest the raw material from, or you catch the fish, it could give you some unique bioactive properties to those omega-3s. But there's also marine peptides, which is a big thing that have been shown to reduce blood sugar, blood pressure, but all these things that are either haven't been fully explored yet or dismissed because they're in a fraction of the material that is considered waste. So there's a lot of that you can do to process these materials without thinking about the complications of regulatory hurdles as well. That it is a lot of times just a matter of making sure that the material doesn't rot and ferment. That's usually the biggest consideration.
Yeah, and I was thinking to myself as well, we've had a number of trainees like SBA Seafood Business Accelerator trainees talk to Andrew, and the great value that Andrew brings to the table is he's aware already, of some of the components of a seafood item or a species that could be utilized for a natural health product. So he gets us thinking about things or opportunities that we hadn't even thought of before. And most of the time, our trainees have come in and they're thinking about making a food product, because that's close to home. It's something that they can think of. And then they start thinking about NHPs either by listening to a podcast like this or Andrew's presentation or talking to Andrew. Then they realize, oh, well, I could make a food product and an NHP, which is a huge project. That in itself is problematic if you're thinking of this, doing multiple things, but knowing that you could actually, ladder your project, or you could get somebody else involved in your project too, in order to capture all the value of that crustacean or fish that you're harvesting. Did that make sense what I said there, Andrew?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's the tip of the iceberg in exploring the opportunities. Of course, if you're co-processing, like you said, Debra, you have your primary catch. If you're going to make fillets, you could be doing something with the scales or the bones. And I think it's often overlooked as to how easy it could be and also cost effective. Like if you're just looking at doing the primary processing locally, and of course there's a number of challenges faced by remote communities and thinking that the infrastructure isn't there. But if you are smoking the fish and oven drying it, fermenting it, grinding it, you don't require massive infrastructure. But also, if you think about it, you're removing water, and water is very heavy. And often that's what you're paying to ship is the water within a fresh fish. Right. And the ice, of course, sometimes. But by drying these fish-based materials, but fish also plant, if we're looking at seaweed as well, kelp, there's a huge opportunity there as well. But drying it removes the moisture and that very expensive ship weight.
Yeah, exactly. And that's funny. I was just thinking we haven't talked about seaweed and kelp yet, but yeah, as well. And removing water is key. And we talked a little bit about now what was the word that you used making interim products that you might sell as opposed to the end product?
Yes, like
Like
business to business opportunities for the raw materials. So, not the raw materials that you catch from the ocean, let's say, if you're thinking about an NHP, it being like a powder in a capsule, that you don't have to think that far ahead. You can be thinking about just making that powder, even flakes that somebody else would buy and that they would then put into their formulation. So there's opportunities for trading with other communities as well. If you want to have some kind of formulation with some fruit and vegetable extracts, some herbal products. Let's say you come up with a remedy for respiratory health. You can have something from Deborah, before we were talking about the example of the New Zealand green-lipped mussel. I don't know how that was discovered, but there's clinical evidence to show that it helps promote respiratory health. And there's a number of things that have just been started to be explored, like some of the marine peptides. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity just to explore through market research and partnerships, just getting out and talking to more people than maybe just what you'd think of as being in the food processing sphere.
yeah, exactly. Couple things that so maybe you just mentioned market research, so I'll talk about that first. Talking to somebody like Andrew, it could be part of your market research, right? So because you're exploring what the potential markets are. So I mean, Andrew has a wealth of information there. So he could help with that. So I can see an entrepreneur going to him, talking to him about, well, I'm thinking about doing this. Are you aware of what the markets are for this? And then, Andrew would provide you with some ideas, and then you could go and do the market research on that, right? So you could find out, how big the market is, where it is, so on and so forth. And we'll talk about market research in another module. And then Andrew is also he would also fall under the product development side, right? So, if you got to the point where, okay, definitely there is a market and now I do want to pursue that, then Andrew or somebody like Andrew is the scientist, right? So helping with the formulations and helping with getting to the point where you would probably do some trials to see if what your theory was actually works, right? And that you could make something. And correct me where I'm wrong there, Andrew. Another thing that came up, and you still have opportunity to correct me.
No, no, that's good.
And
Yeah,
another
sure.
thing that came up, Andrew was talking about B2B, so business to business. And I can really see that in a remote community where you're harvesting large volumes of seaweed, for instance. So, large volumes of sugar pulp, you're bringing it in. Well, you may not be able to actually create the end product there or all the end products that you want to create, but you would be able to create an intermediate product that you could sell to somebody else. And those ideas are being explored. Another option that people have is having things co-packed or contract packed. So, that you come up with a formulation, maybe it's based on an ancestral recipe, or, you hire somebody like Andrew to come up with a recipe for your product. You don't have the capacity to actually capsule it, put it in bottles in your community. But there are companies in Vancouver, for instance, and other cities that do that. That's all they do. And they make these natural health products under contract to whoever it is wants to make these products. I'm pretty sure, Andrew, that they will also work with a proponent to do the product development as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of them
and I
offer
think
that as well. Yeah.
they have the infrastructure there to make the product, and they often offer advice on trademarks and on regulatory submissions. So I should say that's probably one of the things that discourage a lot of people from getting into the NHP space is the daunting Health Canada regulations. But your point, Deborah, working with co-packers could erase those problems. By working with a co-packer, they'll be able to put the product in capsules or creams, ointments, whatever format that
Right.
you've decided is what the market wants.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, you can also be working with other organizations like academic institutions. We can talk more about that. There's programs that fund scientific research to substantiate some new claims.
Yeah.
If you want to say, hey, I think grandma had a good remedy for fish scales and kelp for hair loss. If you want to do
Yep.
a clinical study, and that's something that could substantiate making a hair loss claim, then we can do that, right? And
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of universities and other organizations that can help. So it's not as daunting as it might be made out to seem. There's a lot of good folks out there that are willing to help with every step of the supply chain and bringing
Yeah,
products to market for
exactly.
you.
And yeah, we never even talked about cosmetics, right? So that's another, I mean, that falls under natural health products. And
No, but I often mention them in the same breath because
yeah,
sometimes you have something called medicated ointments. And that means if you want to make a claim for, irritated skin, like minor abrasions, but sometimes it's the same product that is called a cosmetic, exactly the same ingredients. And then instead for the cosmetic, you say that it helps with your youthful glow. So not
yeah,
making
yeah, yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
health claim, but more like a complexion, a beauty claim.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um,
Okay. No, that's good. Yeah.
yeah.
So that's I mean, there are applications for seafood products within cosmetics as well.
Oh yeah, lots.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, fantastic opportunities there. So I think it's the value of that raw material. Like you take the whole fish, and of course there's
Yeah.
the obvious. We said fillet, and but there's the bones, the skin, the scales, the eyes. Some of the organs, like they're rich in a lot of bioactive materials,
Yeah.
bioactive peptides. Of course, rare minerals and other components that by simple drying and grinding, you can have barrels of this material that you could sell B2B or work with a co-packer and put it in capsules and then sell it in the marketplace.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you're reminding me, we did a project at VIU with sturgeon. So the farm sturgeon, so not, not endangered species or anything like that. And the number of uses for sturgeon is just mind blowing. And there actually were quite a few indigenous uses as well for for the cartilage and the knobby bones on the outside of the fish as well were used for, so everything was used. Yeah, there's tons of opportunities. And now I'm also thinking of NHPs for animals. Is that a category unto itself, or is that also?
It's closely related. It's still under Health Canada,
It is,
and I
eh?
believe they've had some changes as of late. We've worked with a number of clients in that space. It's the VHP, veterinary health
Oh,
product.
okay, okay, okay.
So very similar in terms of the review, and yeah, but that said, we do know that there's a number of companies that market the exact same product for humans as they do
Yeah,
for pets, and they just change the label.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I
yeah.
personally, the product we make, citrus peel extract for humans, we don't have a product for companion animals, but we know it's safe, and I give it to my dog.
Yeah. Huh.
Oh,
Wow. I think, yeah, so we could keep going on and on and on about different opportunities. That, I think it's evident that there are a lot of opportunities. It feels a little bit scary, but it's definitely something to look into. And we do have help within the Seafood Business Accelerator. We've got Andrew, and then between, once you start networking, the help expands, right? So
yes.
we're able to get other people involved to help you if this is an area that you want to go in. I do want to just do a little bit of rah-rah for the innovation plan and the Seafood Business Accelerator. And you've had some experience with that, Andrew, as one of our mentors. How do you see that helping somebody who would be looking at an NHP project? How does the canvas help them think of what they need to think of as they're moving along with their plan or their idea?
Yeah, I like the canvas, and having worked with it myself in one form or another in my startup Lean Launchpad activities, I can see that it's easy to modularize like the activities. So of course, there's so many different things that are swirling in your mind as you're thinking about developing a product, bringing it to market, all the legal, regulatory, that if you're looking at the innovation canvas, it allows you to map out what the important next steps are. And to go back to what I think are some of the early most important steps it's the market research. So getting out and talking to more people. And of course, it's the proverbial getting out. You can request calls from people in Germany, right? And there's a global opportunity here to ship out your material, but at the same time, you could see how it can benefit your community, really crafting that brand story, right? Where it's many Indigenous communities have these traditions and are just waiting to, and the stories are waiting to be told around the world. And that ecological knowledge and respecting nature, it's about, embracing the benefits of what nature can provide in ways that history has almost forgotten, until we get to, sort of share these stories to everyone. So on that subject of community engagement and supporting local communities, I think, when you're doing this research, it's connecting, to different points of the globe, but also seeing how it can help at home with youth engagement, local economic diversification, and seeing it's not just trying to sell something, down the street, but it's like finding these people that love, your rich history of traditions and embrace what it is that you are making and selling for the good of humans everywhere. So I think there's a lot of these sort of circular economies as well, that you're telling of making use of the whole fish or the whole aquatic plant, right? The whole crustacean. And there are many pockets of those potential customers. They don't have to be in Canada or the United States. They can be on the other side of the planet. And now the technology exists that you can have a Zoom call at midnight here, and tomorrow afternoon in Japan. There to help. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually that, it's a really good segue. I mean, most of the fishing fleets are quite familiar, or maybe they aren't, but that a lot of their catches have ended up in Asia. A lot of the times they're being consumed because the Asians are consuming them for health benefits, right? So is there a way of capturing those health, or concentrating those health benefits for these other markets as well? So
yeah, I think, and also, like I alluded to, the difficulties faced by remote communities, but at the same time, some of the remote communities can be providing some of the most pristine types of raw material that aren't facing the same kind of pollutants in nature, like pesticides, fungicides that are floating through waterways elsewhere. That having some oysters from a very remote island could be highly sought after in foreign markets.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Yeah, no, there's a lot of good things. So I think this gives us some, I don't know if hope is the right, but gives us some more, more ideas. That was the idea of bringing Andrew in, is to open our eyes into other opportunities and doing things differently than how we've done them in the past. And I think we've covered a lot of that here. And I invite everyone to take a look at some of the other modules that we're offering. We have some really good ones on finding grant money. So everybody needs some help to do their projects, and good opportunities to learn a little bit more about market research, product development, so on and so forth. So
There's
with
lots
that,
of these new organizations that are cropping up that didn't exist, say, 10 years ago, right? Natural Products Canada, Canadian Food Innovation Network, and many more, right? That are cropping up to help with what we're talking about.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you mentioned that as well. Yeah, no, there is a lot of support there. It's finding those networks, and that's one of the things that we really like to do, is help people find those networks. Well, it's been wonderful seeing you again and talking with you, Andrew. It's been fun.
Debra?
And
Pleasure.
yeah, it is for sure.